So welcome. Today we have a really special and important guest. His name is Len Morris, and he works making documentaries and various films. He's the director of Media Voices for Children, and Mrs. Allen has been coming around showing us some of the films and projects that are included in his group. He has received numerous awards for his work and is an extraordinary person who works really hard to help children who are suffering under child labor and violations of their human rights. And his work is really important to all of us because we all have the opportunity to learn, whereas other kids don't. Len worked in TV to start off with, and he decided that he wanted to do something more important and just got bored of what he was doing, and he found this project and decided to pursue it. He does this work out of passion and to help kids all around the world. His films have been shown to many different colleges, and he works with the U.S. State Department, the U.S. Labor Department, and he's working to change laws and to change the way we view child labor and the things we do to help kids get out of the places that they're in. So he's going to be showing us 4 trailers from 4 different documentaries that he's made, and he also made the film Children of Bal Ashram, which you've seen the posters around, and it's going to be showing tonight, so I'm sure he'll talk about it, but please try to go see it because it's very important and very poignant. So please give him all your attention and be prepared because we'll be asking questions later, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sydney, and Rich Christian and the Freeland Film Festival. This is like a Hollywood thing here in your gym that they have set up. Lights, screen, sound, camera, action. So thank you, Evelyn, and the principal of your school. I asked to come to your school when I was fortunate enough to have our latest documentary chosen for the Freeland Film Festival. My first question was, hey, is there a school that I can visit? Because you probably are not all that thrilled to get up every day and come here, but I like to come to schools, and I appreciate very much the chance to be here and to have a conversation with you. And I would like it actually to be that. I talk a lot, and so what I'd rather do is show you short pieces of film and talk to you about the content of those pieces. They're trailers, but because they're trailers, they don't last real long, and then we can talk about what's the same that you see in the trailer and what's changed, because the 4 trailers cover a period of about 25 years' time, and things have changed since I started doing this work. So the first film trailer I'd like to show you is from a film called Stolen Childhoods, and it was the first movie ever produced on child labor around the world, on global child labor around the world. It was shot in 8 countries. It has probably 13 or 14 languages in it. It took 7 years to film. Can anybody tell me why it would take so long to make a film on child labor like that? Why did it take so long? Because I was kind of ashamed and shocked at how long it took. Yeah.
Because you had to go to a lot of different places and find different people?
I did. I had to go to, I'm going to repeat what you said. I had to go to a lot of different places. That's true. Any I'm going to give you the main reason, okay? Nobody likes, you're not welcome anywhere when you come to film child labor. You're not welcome into the country. You're not welcome on the coffee plantation where kids are picking coffee. You're not welcome in the light bulb factory. You're not welcome in the sex club where girls are being bought and sold. You're not welcome in any of these places. And the other thing is, you can't schedule it. Like, we could schedule this, right? You all came in, it's like 1:15. We're here, it's 1:15. I can't say, hey, I'll be there on Tuesday in Kenya to film the kids picking the coffee. It doesn't work like that. You have to pack up and get ready and go and sort of take your chances. So this film, I was shocked it took as long as it took. I had children your age, even younger, while I was working on it. I'll show you this trailer. It's from Stolen Childhoods. The voice you'll hear is Meryl Streep, actually, who narrates the movie. Okay, we'll start with that.
For 246 million children, life is nothing but work. 12 hours a day I pick, boil, and sort the fish.
I was 7 or 8 years old when I went to work in people's homes.
I started working in a stone quarry when I was 10. If we got hurt, they never gave us medicine. The chemicals that are applied also burn your face. It's as if hot water has been poured in your face and hands.
This is the breeding ground for Osama bin Laden's army and for future terrorists. If we don't get these kids into school and get them a decent education, we're going to have more terrorism in the future.
Misusing children as workers is a form of murder. It's a slow death that you are giving, a sentence of death that you're giving to the child.
Okay. What's the difference between work and child labor? Who can tell me? Would you stand up and speak up so people can hear you?
Child labor is different than work because child labor is closer to slavery. They don't have an option.
Closer to slavery, no options. Okay, anybody else have an idea? The difference between work, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys work. My children worked, but why is that not child labor? Yes.
The difference is that every 6 hours in work, you get a half an hour break.
You get breaks when you're at a job, which also sounds like there are laws that protect you when you work at the hardware store or McDonald's or wherever you work. If you take a part-time job, there are laws that protect you, and that's true. That's true in this country for all but one kind of work, and we'll talk about that in a second. Yes.
So they don't get like breaks. They barely get any food, and if they get hurt, they just don't don't get medicine or any help.
Okay, no medical care, no breaks, no food. So I really think that three of you have very quickly touched upon what's different about what I'm showing you here and why I'm showing this to you. At the time that we started first of all, I'll begin by saying everything that you saw in that trailer, kids in gravel quarries, children making bricks, kids on fishing platforms who don't leave the platform for months at a time, who are processing fish that ends up in cat food. What else did we see? Were there any kids working in the carpet industry in the trailer? Excuse me. First of all, it's kind of a blur for me because this is what I do. Second of all, I know the kids. You don't just go and film. You kind of get to know who they are. You might know their parents. You might meet their family. You might, so it's kind of personal. But everything that you just saw, unfortunately, continues today. So that's the bad news. The bad news is we still have this going on. And now the good news. The good news is that since this film was made, and it was the first of its kind, there are 100 million fewer children working like this around the world. This is what we call the worst forms of child labor. The worst forms of child labor is child labor that compromises or risks the health of the child, the physical safety of the child, the personal dignity of the child, the ability of the child to fulfill their dreams and become who they want to be, okay? That's what this is. And the numbers have changed dramatically and improved dramatically. Can somebody guess why that's the case? It's not just this one movie. So let's, this is part of it. But why do you think this movie came out in 2004 and I started it in 1996, right? Why do you think now where are we, 2019, why do you think now there are 100 million fewer children working like animals? Because those children are working like animals, yes. People realized it's wrong. That's very important. It is wrong, right? Does everybody get that, like right away? I mean, if you look at that, does that immediately make you think, right, that's not okay? I'm interested in that. How many people had that reaction, that that's not okay? Okay, it's pretty depressing, actually, but I think you hit on something very important, that people have seen this now, and they get this, and they understand that this goes on. Why else? Why else? Yes.
Because people who understand what they feel like want them to stop suffering, so they go there and try to help them.
Okay. People want to stop the suffering, and they go there to try and help them. And now we have tools that didn't exist when we started with this. We have the internet. People can get information. You can get information. Who drinks coffee? How many people drink coffee? I can't even speak in the morning if I haven't had coffee. I'd like to put it, if I could, I'd like to put it in an IV and have the IV follow me around for the first hour of the day. Who drinks tea? Okay. Well, coffee and tea involve children in the production of the product, in what we call the supply chain, at the beginning of the source of the product, in 24 countries around the world. So what does that do for most of us who just raised our hands, who drink coffee and tea? Anybody have an idea? Yes, in the back. You have to stand up and shout. I can't hear that. Can somebody? Well, you are putting them at risk unless, of course, you buy coffee that's been picked by adults. Look, guys, this is actually really simple. You know, I've gone to conferences at Harvard where people have presented academic studies about child labor and talked about all the different things and talked about, you know, this, that, and the other thing and read from their 400-page report. Let's make it really simple. Adults should do the work. Children should go to school. These kids can't go to school. They would kill to be able to do what you do every day, which is get up and come to this school and work on who you're going to be, what you want to do, what you want to become, where you want to continue your education, what you want to do when you grow up, those kinds of things. They would love nothing better than that. And I've run a program in Kenya for child laborers for about 20 years. Let me tell you something. When you take a child off of a coffee plantation who's hungry and covered in pesticides and has been working for all that time, and you put him in school, they do great. They do fabulously because they really appreciate the opportunity. So there are 100 million fewer children working like this today than when we started. I think that's awesome. There are hundreds of companies now that understand that if they're going to protect their brand, like Disney or General Motors or Kellogg or Pepsi or Coca-Cola or Patagonia, that if they're going to protect their brand, they have to not use ingredients that children are responsible for. 70% of child labor is in agriculture. Things are food related, okay? Do we have any of this in our country? Somebody said yes. Can you tell me where? And yes, where? In mines and fields of cotton. I would have to say no to that here on the basis of my knowledge. But we do have child labor and plenty of it. Where is it? What, I call it a sector. What part of what we use, eat, buy, and wear is produced by children in this country? Yes?
Agriculture.
Food, agriculture, what we eat. Who goes to the grocery store? Who buys stuff to eat? Well, guess what? 500,000 children work as migrant laborers with their families in virtually every state. Is that against the law? Somebody told me earlier that the law protects you at work and you get breaks and things like that. Do these kids get breaks? Are they protected by the law? Anybody? What do you think? No, you're right. They're not. The law to end child labor in the United States was passed in 1939, and they left out one thing, and that should mean something in this area, in this community. They left out children on the family farm who helped their parents on the family farm. They did, produce food to raise the livestock on the farm with farming. So they exempted child work in agriculture. That seems kind of reasonable to me. I'm from Virginia. My family's farmed in Virginia for 300 years. I haven't been around for 300 years. I'm old, but I'm not that old. But I've picked peaches and apples, and I've sprayed pesticides on peaches, and then I'd pick them and I'd rub them on my shirt like an idiot, and I'd eat them, and and so forth. And that was fine. It was a family farm. We ate everything that we grew. In 1939, 95% of the farms in America were family farms. What about now? How many farms, what's the percentage of farms in America today that would actually qualify as a family farm? Take a guess. Yeah. Take a guess. Yes. You, in that, right there. You. 1%. A little higher than that. Yes. You're very close. Close enough for government work. 5%. 5%. The rest of the farms are what we call agribusinesses. And so the 500,000 children who are working aren't working on family farms. They're being exploited, basically. They're picking onions in Texas for a penny a pound. I've filmed that. They're picking tomatoes for McDonald's in Florida for 5 cents a pound. They pick in 100-degree temperatures. There's no sanitation, and there are 300 different kinds of pesticides that are applied on farms today that these kids are exposed to. So that's probably the worst of it. The very worst of it would be children in America working in tobacco production. And we have tens of thousands of those, mostly in the South, stringing and picking and curing and handling tobacco. So do you have any questions generally? That's a very broad general introduction to child labor, that we have it, that things are getting better. It's getting better because people know about it. It's getting better because people understand that it's not right, that it's not ethical, that it's not moral. And by the way, it's not Democratic and it's not Republican. Donald Trump did not create child labor. Bill Clinton did not create child labor. George Bush did not create child labor. This is kind of like a dirty river or a dirty lake or dirty air. This is a generational thing. This is something that we work on over time to make change. It's not red or blue. It's more like right or wrong, I would say. And using the internet, you have the capacity to find products that you can buy that will minimize child labor. For openers, you can buy fair trade organic produce at the supermarket or at the store. Nothing's better than locally grown, but if you can buy fair trade or organic, that has less pesticides. Better for you, better for the kids in Wisconsin who are the migrant kids who work in this area and in every other state when they migrate here to work. So, any other questions about this or this particular film or these clips? Anything? Yes?
So, what can people here do to help down there?
What can you do to help down there? There are a lot of things that you can do to help, and I'm sending information back to your classes with your teachers. I'm sending links to organizations that you can look into. I'm sending information about volunteer groups that have been organized internationally and nationally for students your age, for communities, for schools. I'm sending videos and apps that you can put on your phone to find out what products to buy and use. Because basically, you guys are, my generation has already kind of blown it, but your generation has an opportunity just by using your economy, what you buy. You want to buy sweat clothes, for instance? Don't buy Egyptian cotton, don't buy cotton from Uzbekistan, don't buy cotton produced by children. Buy cotton that's clean. There's a program called the Clean Cotton Campaign. You just go online, you click on it, and they'll tell you exactly where to go to buy sweat clothes and things of that kind. And more and more and more and more, the needle is moving this way. What Martin Luther King called the arc of justice. The arc of justice is on the side of these children. And I tell businesses when I go to the Department of Labor to speak to them, I tell them, if you don't clean up your supply chain, meaning where all your stuff comes from, if you don't do it and you don't do it soon, you're going to look up one day and nobody's going to want to wear your clothes, buy your cereal, or have anything to do with you. So I'm going to shift a little bit right now. I was in Kenya making a film on street children. I actually was trying to make a film, another great big film all over the world. I shot in 6 countries, and I wanted to make a film about street children. Street children are just exactly what it sounds like. A child without a relationship or a very slim relationship to family, a child living by their wits on the street. In some countries, they kill them and remove them because they're bad for business and tourism. In other countries, they just stash them out of the way. They're the poorest of the poor. They're really dangerous and really unpleasant. And I was filming in Kenya when this one boy, Emmanuel, his name was Emmanuel, which means God with us. Emmanuel saw my wife, Georgia, and he attached himself to her, and he called her mama, and he jumped in front of the camera every time I tried to turn it on, and I had a whole thing that I was trying to do, and he was ruining everything. And I really didn't like him at all. And then we had to leave for the western part of Kenya where I had a shoot set up, and I'm riding in the bus, and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and my wife Georgia is saying to me, I wonder how Emmanuel is. She says, I wonder if we can help Emmanuel. I wonder if we can find Emmanuel. I wonder if Emmanuel will be alive when we come back. And I'm thinking, no, I don't want to hear this. I'm a journalist. I'm here to film. I'm not here to help, you know? So she's asking me to cross a line from reporting on this to actually finding him. To say nothing of trying to find a 13-year-old boy in a city of 3 million who's just going to run away when you try and find him, okay? So this is the film that we made about Emmanuel. It's called Rescuing Emmanuel. This is the trailer, and we can talk a little bit about this. And by the way, international labor organizations, the UN, the world community classifies a street child as a child laborer because they do things like wash windows and, you know, they do stuff, but mostly they steal and live by their wits and are very unpleasant. So anyway, this is Rescuing Emmanuel.
This approach is very dirty, but I want to go to school right now.
Sasa sisi tunatambaa tu peke yetu na maisha ya Mungu.
Many people have been promising heaven, but they don't turn up. But because you came back, my heart was bumping, saying, God, can this be miracle? Can this be angels who are sent by God to rescue just one boy?
I'm staying with you today. You stay with me? Yeah, I'm going to. Yeah, and me, I want to go to school? Yes. Me? I want to be a pilot. I told you. I know you told me.
So I didn't want to make a film about Emmanuel. I wanted to ignore Emmanuel, but he couldn't be ignored. And the lady that you saw interacting with him is Georgia, my wife and partner. And she is truly clueless to take on a shoot of this kind because she doesn't think about danger at all, and she plunges into slums, and she'll just go anywhere, and it's kind of horrifying. I have to make sure that she doesn't get killed. But I think her heart makes a path for her. Anyway, she's the one who said, you've got to help Emmanuel. Who knows what he had in his mouth? Remember he had a bottle in his mouth? Anybody notice that? Anybody know what that is? Did you notice that? Did you see that? In a couple of scenes, he said, you know, in between while he was picking garbage. That scene where he was picking garbage, that was the first time I saw him. That was at a bus station in central Nairobi. He was literally picking through a mound of garbage for food. But the bottle, anybody? It's shoe glue. It's shoe glue. Street children inhale shoe glue all over the world because it suppresses hunger. It gets them high, of course, but what it really does is eliminate the feeling of hunger. Has anybody traveled outside of the United States around the world? Has anybody in your travels, have you noticed children on the streets? The thing that's so amazing to me is the trend that has been happening here. This is not an area that's getting better. I have to be honest with you. And this is the hardest film I've ever made. It's the easiest to watch because Emmanuel's really cool, but the truth of it is there are 100 million children living on the streets around the world in virtually every country, including in the United States. We include the United States in all of our films. When you look at Rescuing Emmanuel, you will see street children living with their mothers 3 blocks from the United States Capitol. So we never exempt, because we show our movies all over the world, we feel like we need to include the United States. We can't be the world's preachers as if we don't have these things. We do. There are about 100 million Emmanuels in the world. 100 million, I don't know. How big's Milwaukee? 4 million? I mean, if you were 100 million people, right, you would have delegates at the United Nations. That's 2.5 times the population of Iran or Sweden. That's a lot of people, 100 million. They don't have food, they don't have medical care, and they are really smelly and not great, okay? And it's tricky to work with them. But Emmanuel, like all of the children, had a dream to go to school. He wanted to be a pilot. And all of these children they all have dreams. They all want to get off the street, and they all want to be something, and they all want to go somewhere and become somebody. I'm going to show you a different trailer now about something very fundamental about why we have 100 million Emmanuels and 85 million children working like this. It's from a film called The Same Heart. Can we take a look at that? That's the next trailer.
Our humanity is bound up with one another's. What happens to you inexorably affects me.
It's really hard for us to imagine, I think, people getting by on so little.
The world has enough resources to ensure that each child lives in dignity and decency. It is possible. It is human greed which makes this impossible.
Those who are powerful determine the rules. When the game is played, they decide. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to say that that is unjust, and nobody needs an educator to tell them, I am hungry. I know I'm hungry, and I can see food here.
When you have millions of people in the United States and millions across the earth that are suffering from hunger, charity can't solve that.
Markets don't exist in a vacuum. Politics shapes markets. And in doing so, they shape the level of equality of opportunity.
You have people at hedge funds that often make over $100 million a year, sometimes over $1 billion a year. So if you're concerned about inequality, this is where a lot of those very high-end earners are.
So the question is, what kind of world do we want to live in?
Doing good to the other is not being altruistic. If you want to be able to enjoy your wealth and your prosperity, share it.
Okay, so this is a film about a big idea that could be a game-changing idea around the world. Right now, there are 2.2 billion children in the world, and according to CARE, you've heard of CARE, the group, the civil society group, every other child around the world is lacking clean water, food, medical care, shelter, basic safety, one of the basics of a regular life. And the reason is money. Drugs to prevent diseases that we have cures for cost money. Everything costs money, and our aid system is kind of like passing the hat, So The Same Heart, ending poverty one transaction at a time. Who can guess what that is about? Ending poverty one transaction at a time. It's called the financial transaction tax. In England, they call it the Robin Hood tax. It has over 1,000 economists who favor it. There are 17 countries in the world that are already using it. The European Union is about to adopt it. Here's what it is. Every time stock is bought or sold, anytime a currency exchange happens, currency exchanges currently happen around the world, and all the profits go to banks, untaxed, completely untaxed. The idea is that a tiny percentage of every transaction goes into a fund to provide food, medical care, sanitation, access to education. That's the idea behind the financial transaction tax. Right now, we're in a presidential campaign season. Every one of the Democratic candidates has some version, their version, the Kamala Harris version, or something that they've invented in the last hour, but the idea is the same. Taxing transactions to raise a lot of money. There are bills in Congress with co-sponsors that you can support if you like this idea. I'll give you an example. The United States has a $17 trillion a year economy. We are 1/3 of the world's economy. If you put a financial transaction tax on just our economy at 1/2 cent, at a rate of 1/2 cent per $1,000 traded, you will raise close to $60 billion a year in income, just invisibly. The simplest way to think of it is this. Do you have bank cards? Anybody have an ATM card? A bank account, an ATM card? Oh, well, if you don't, you'll get one soon enough. But, you know, you go to the bank anywhere in the world, or right here, you put your card in, and the machine says, I'll be happy to give you $20, I'll give you $25. That'll be $2. And the bank charges you to withdraw your own money, especially if you're not like right here at your local bank. They're going to charge you. The financial transaction tax idea is that 2 cents of that transaction, 3 cents of that transaction will be collected and go into a fund for the purposes that I described. And it'll be collected automatically. Computers will do it automatically. You can't escape it. You can't get away from it. Every transaction. And the power of it is what I just said. Every transaction. A lot of money moves around. And this is a way of creating enough money that we can do something about hunger around the world, about girls that can't go to school. You know, there are real numbers, real estimates that have been prepared. I'll give you an example. Children, babies, 5- and 6-year-old babies have HIV. HIV is the virus, the AIDS virus. They obviously haven't gotten it because they've been partying. They've gotten it from their pregnant mothers in transmission in Africa and Asia, but also not so much in the United States because we have expensive drugs that prevent that. But in countries that can't afford that, this happens. Out of that population of babies, only 1 in 6 gets the medicine that would enable them to live. So it would be a little bit like, let's say I picked 6 of you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I had you over for dinner, and you're all sick, and you have a disease that without the medicine, you'll die from, for sure, 100%. And I'm the aid part of the United States, an agency called USAID, and I'm also the UN agency, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Malaria, and TB. And I dole out the drugs. And I dole out only the amount of drugs that I have the amount of money for, right? So the 6 of you are there. I have enough drugs for 1 of you. Who's going to live? Nah, let's make it her. Sorry. Everybody else goes home and will be dead by the time they're age 10 because we didn't commit enough money to prevent a disease from killing a child that we already have a cure for. Isn't this a little bit like the child labor stuff that we looked at 45 minutes ago? Doesn't that for me, I hear that and I look at that and I go, that hits the wrong button. Not the Republican button or the Democratic button, the wrong button, the not okay button. So I like this idea. This is a big game-changing idea because everything that I've ever seen, filmed, and reported on in these movies can be connected to poverty. Poverty is the thing everywhere we go. Poverty, prejudice, profiteering, and policy. Policy meaning that government thing that says, no, we're not going to come up with the money. 4 Ps are at the heart of it, but the thing that creates these problems more than anything is poverty. So the last clip I want to show you, because I know it's Friday, and you've been fantastic. Last clip I want to show is from tonight's film that's premiering at your film festival. It's called Children of Bal Ashram. Why don't I just show the clip and we can talk about it briefly and yeah, okay.
बाल आश्रम में रहने वाले जितने भी बच्चे हैं वो कहीं ना कहीं किसी न किसी तरह की विपत्ति के शिकार थे। उन्होंने अपने जीवन में बहुत तरह तरह के अत्याचार सहे हैं, चाहे वो हिंसा के नाम पर या काम के नाम पर या यौन अत्याचार के नाम पर भी। हमें तो ऐसे ऐसे अनुभव उनसे पता चले हैं कि हम सोच भी नहीं सकते थे कि बच्चों को इस तरह की उनके बचपन में इस तरह के अत्याचार सहने कर पड़ते हैं।
Should be the spokespersons, voices, and heroes for their 100 million deaf sisters and brothers.
Okay, before we talk about this film, everybody stand up for just a minute. Just stand up. Stretch, shake it out. Take a few minutes. This is a lot. I know that this is a lot, and I apologize for sort of how intense. It's pretty, I think a lot of it's pretty intense, but okay, can we continue? All right. I just thought maybe. This whole row, by the way, is gone. They don't exist anymore, remember? We just killed them about 10 minutes ago. So you're gone. So, which is good that we don't have to deal with what your problems are. But, so, Bal Ashram, an ashram is a refuge. It's not an orphanage per se, it's a refuge. This refuge is in northern India on the coast with Pakistan. You can look it up on Google Map. In fact, you can visit and go inside it, or you can just come tonight and you'll really get a chance to meet these kids and see what they're doing. I started filming in Rajasthan 23 years ago. So all the child labor in the movie that has been eliminated, and it has been completely eliminated in that area, is the result of two people, Sumedha and Kailash Satyarthi, husband and wife. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014 for the work he's done for 40 years to end child labor. He's brave, he goes into places and he rescues children physically. He's rescued 88,000 children from trafficked children who are being held against their will and tortured and worked. He goes in with teams. I've filmed the rescues. They're unbelievable. They're like military operations. And he's very brave, and he's almost been killed several times. And for that, and for his political advocacy for children, and all of the work that he's done to create international law, all of which the United States has signed, agreements like the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Treaty for the Rights of the Child, or the Declaration of Human Rights of the Child. These are international treaties, binding treaties that the United States has in some instances helped write and signed. This guy, Kailash, is the guy who did it. But the real heart of the whole thing is Sumeda, and you'll meet Sumeda tonight or when you can see the movie. I've left all these movies with your school so that if you're interested, you'll be able, hopefully, to either take them out through the library or look at them. And if the school wants to arrange to put them on some kind of server so you can stream them, that would be good too. I'd like anybody who's willing to look at these movies should sure be able to look at them. This movie is really not a buzzkill because the kids are amazing. They've been rescued, they come back to Bal Ashram, they're a family. And there's a whole section in the film, more than half of the film, about the young girls at Balika Ashram, which is right across the street, and about girls and child-friendly villages, places where children are protected from child labor and where young girls go to school and are prevented from early marriage. So this is these kids have gone from the worst things that you've seen to being rescued, and now they're traveling all over the world. That march that you saw a little bit of, that was an 11,000 kilometer march across India that involved 5.5 million people. We filmed it. I went to India, I thought I was going for 9 days. I ended up being there for 6 weeks. And these kids just kind of blew me away. So the film tonight is really their story. It's not a thing with long narration, what have you. It is in Hindi. We did have to subtitle a lot of it. But even if you can't read it, you'd get it just by watching it, I think. So it's very encouraging. Kailash told me that now that he's won the Nobel Peace Prize, if he says yes to every speaking engagement he's been given at the UN and the World Bank and before the Congress and before the General Assembly and so on, he'll be talking for the next 16 years. It's a big deal to raise the profile of child labor at that level around the world, and he does that. There was someone else that shared the Nobel Prize with him that year, a young girl. Does anybody know her name? It was a 14-year-old girl who won the Nobel Peace Prize with Kailash that year, shared it with her. Anybody know her? Know the name? Malala. Have you ever heard the name Malala? You have? Okay. Do you know why she won the Nobel Peace Prize? It's not because she rescued kids for 40 years. Yes. She went against the Taliban. What did she do when she went against the Taliban? You, right there. Say it again. She took a bullet to the face. Why did they shoot her in the face? Yes.
Because she started protesting because they banned girls from going to school.
Ah, she was protesting the fact that they, in her culture, banned girls from going to school. And when they shot her, where was she when they shot her? They also killed a bunch of her friends. Where was she? Oh, wait a minute, you're dead. No, I'm sorry, you're back.
She was on the bus.
She was on the school bus. Hello? Who rides the bus to school? Oh, great. Well, I'm going to climb onto the bus and I'm going to shoot anybody that's wearing a gray sweatshirt because I hate them. I guess that doesn't work. Oh, she took her sweatshirt off. Here's the thing. Malala was 14 years old. She was going to school. I know the organization that runs the school that she's going to, okay? They shot her. They really hurt her very badly. She and her family escaped to London, where she went through surgeries and recovery, which took several years. Then what did she do? Somebody tell me what she did after she recovered. Anybody over here know what Malala did after she recovered? In the back. I can't hear. Start. Well, yes, she wrote a book, but she did more than that. She did something really that I don't think I would do, not if somebody shot me in the face. What'd she do? Exactly. She went back to school. She went back to school. That is a lot of courage. So we've looked at some very hard things. We've seen some ideas that could change things financially. We have 2 Nobel Prize winners now who've committed their lives and risked their lives to raise this issue around the world. There's a campaign I would like you to know about called the 100 Million Campaign. That's what those kids are marching in. Find out about the 100 Million Campaign. Your school could do that. Your church could do that. Your book group could do that. The National Honor Society could do that. Anybody, you can join. They've got all kinds of ways that you can get involved. You can use your personal economy to buy, wear, use, and eat things that don't involve child labor. You can pay attention to how you dispose of your electronics, because a lot of that ends up in Ghana and places like that, with children being exposed to mercury and things in our cell phones. And there's an app out called, I think it's called, it's a slave app, where it's a questionnaire that asks you, like, what do you like to eat and what do you use and what have you. And I took the questionnaire, and it takes a long time, and it's all plugged into a computer, and it says, like, do you eat Brazil nuts? Oh yes. Do you like coffee? Uh-huh. Do you have a television? Yes. Do you have a camera? Uh-huh. And it asks you everything that you buy, use, and what have. And needless to say, I have lots of cameras and lots of drives and lots of monitors, and I like to eat. I'm an equal opportunity eater. I eat everything. Anyway, I finished this survey, and I pushed the button, and it said that I have 54 slaves around the world supporting the way I live. And this is what I do. It was not cool. So I'm working on it. And that's what I'm suggesting you do. Learn more, find out more, work on it, work at it. That's all you really can do. I wish I could say it was really easy. Just do this, everything would be fine. It's more complicated than that. But, you know, that's the job, basically. And you're definitely the ones. Look into the 100 Million Campaign. It's the largest youth-led human rights movement in history. Look into it. It's really serious business, okay? And thank you for having me. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions that you have, but I'm finished talking. So, thank you. Do you want to give any questioners the mic? Because I'm pretty loud. Okay, that's fine. And Sydney, thank you, by the way.
Do we have anybody from the 6th grade who wants to ask a question? Come on up. Okay. Anybody from the 7th grade?
There you go. There's a little more. So, hi.
What's the saddest thing you've ever seen?
What's the saddest thing I've ever seen? The saddest thing, I've seen a lot of sad things. One, I'd have to put it that way, one of the saddest things I've ever seen was just a child, a malnourished, they call it stunting. Stunting is a kind of hunger or malnutrition that goes on for months, for years. And I was at a school in Kenya where we help with lunches and pay for kids to go to school. And I saw this little girl, and she was tiny. I mean, she was really tiny and thin, and they brought her out to meet me, and everybody was smiling, and everybody introduced me to her, and I asked how old she was, and she was like 13, and she was, malnourished, and she was basically starving, and everybody was smiling like it was normal, and it just set me off. And I have to say, I have people I've worked with for 30 years who come with me. This is not me. I'm I do a lot of filming, and I do organize a lot of this, but I work with a team of people. I've worked with hundreds of people and dozens of organizations. And when we go for weeks and months at a time, and sooner or later, every member of the crew has something. You just, at a certain point, it just gets you, and you just have to go behind a building and collect yourself and cry and get it out of your system. And it nails everybody. My cameraman, my other cameraman, Georgia, it gets her. She always interviews the girls when we travel for these films, because these girls can't talk to me. A little girl in Mexico picking tobacco with her father sitting there, she can't even look directly at me. So I just set the camera up and get out of the way and and just disappear totally. That's the only way, we can ever get that. And when you go through all of that, it gets you. But most of the time, I'm not sad. Most of the time, forgive me for putting it this way, most of the time I'm pissed off. I'm just angry. This makes me angry. So this is what I do with anger. It's where I put it. Did that answer your question? Okay. Okay.
Through the years that you've done journalism, have you learned different languages from it?
Shamefully, no. I've learned that I was really a jerk when I used to sit in French class with a screwdriver and take the ALM French unit apart into 30 pieces instead of actually applying myself. I wish I had. There are 42 different tribes just in Kenya. I mean, we've dealt with probably 15 primary languages and 40 dialects. I use translators, on site, and I've set up an audio system traveling. Rich, you'd be interested in this, that enables us to record, record the interview in its native language, translate it simultaneously, so I'm listening to it 50 feet away and can communicate a question to the interviewer, who probably is a social worker that the family knows or somebody that they trust, so that the interview isn't, I ask a question like, why are you here picking tobacco and why are you in child labor? And, and then they talk for 10 minutes and then a translator says, she says she's fine, or the sky is blue, you know what I mean? I can't work like that. So we do that, and also before we finish a film, we bring people into the editing room. This film, Children of Bal Ashram, the cameraman, Jatin Makar, the Indian director of photography that I worked with, who's from New Delhi, came to our house, stayed with us for 3 weeks, and went into the editing room every day and went over every line, every nuance for the subtitles. Because if you're gonna just because I speak English, if I'm going to show this at the United Nations, and we do, it would be insulting, right? If you didn't get the translation right. So, no, I speak English, much to my regret. If I could do it differently, I would. But now I'm too old and I can't remember anything. But you're not too old. You could learn 5 languages. Learn Chinese and Arabic.
Why doesn't the government step in and stop these things?
That's an awesome question, especially starting right here. Why isn't child labor outlawed in the United States in agriculture? There's been a bill, the CARE Act, before Congress for 20 years. The closest it's gotten is 123 members of Congress to sponsor it, which is not enough. Nobody's willing to champion poor children. But in other countries throughout Africa and places like that, a lot of it just is that whoever rules gets all of the goodies, gets all the money, all the land, all the everything. And so it's just basically greed and corruption. That's basically the answer. Corruption.
What do some of the organizations do to help with the child labor and programs like that?
The best organizations that work against child labor that I know of are organizations that put kids in school and take them out of these circumstances and pay for them to go to school. And a lot of them are organizations that work in specific areas, and they go in and they inspect. Like, let's take carpets. Everybody's got, I don't know if you, beautiful Asian carpets, handmade carpets. 20 years ago, there were 250,000 children just working in carpets in Pakistan, India, Nepal, Afghanistan. Now the number is a quarter of that. There's an organization called Goodweave. They used to be called Rugmark, but Goodweave. Goodweave goes in and makes a deal with the loom operator that there'll be no children. And if they find children, they put them in school, in a Goodweave school. I have beautiful photographs of girls in Afghanistan who were carpet slaves who are now in school. Best organizations are ones that put kids in school, because a child in school isn't available for this kind of abuse. And nothing's more powerful, to control the size of the world's population or the ability of the world economy than to include girls. There are 65 million more girls in school today than there were just a decade ago because of Malala and girls like her who just aren't willing to be sidelined. So if I were starting out, I'd be sure to look at organizations like Goodweave that help kids go to school. Yeah.
How do you make money to make these films?
How do I make money to make these films? I raise the money privately in donations. I don't take any government money because these films criticize the government. I certainly don't take any bank money because if you get a chance to look at the same heart, you'll see that it's not friendly towards banks, especially. I get the money from private individuals. I've lived for 30 years in a small community, Martha's Vineyard, 14,000 people, a lot of famous people in the summer, celebrities and presidents and what have you. And I get money from them, mostly from 300 or 400 of my neighbors who know that I've been doing this and that Georgia and I have been doing this for decades. But we also get grants from foundations, but that's how we do it. So we beg a lot. I do a lot of groveling for money. These movies are not about money. I worked in television, in network television for TNT and HBO and ABC and NBC and PBS for 25 years. I'm old. And I made a lot of money. This is not that. But this is a really good reason to get up every day and use a camera, if that's what you know how to do. And this is not about money. But that's where I get it. I get it privately. If you really, really want to know specifically where I get the money, you can look at the end of every film. Anybody that ever gave me money is on the end of the film. In fact, The Same Heart was done with a GoFundMe campaign. There are like 125 of my neighbors listed at the end of the movie. People are usually halfway home by the time. And the credits on Stolen Childhoods is almost 7 minutes long, the number of organizations and people who've given us money. So that's where I get the money. I beg for it.
So whatever happened to Manuel?
Emmanuel, we collected Emmanuel. We took him and cleaned him up. Did you see where he put the deodorant on the outside of his shirt, by the way? Did anybody notice that? That was hilarious. He was very sweet. We took him to an orphanage called Haruma, run by a remarkable woman named Mama Zipporah, and he joined a family of 147 orphans. And he went to school, and it looked like he was okay, but then we got a call one day that he had run away. Haruma was very disciplined. You had to go to school, you had to do your homework, you had to eat, you had to wake up, you had to do your chores, and Emmanuel was 13. He had already been on the street for 7 years when we met him. And his friends were on the street, and he just couldn't cut it. He disappeared out the gates of Haruma. We spent 3 years trying to find him. I paid people to go into the prison system because street children are arrested and put in jail in Kenya, and if you don't have any papers, if you don't have a birth certificate, if you're like Emmanuel, you know, kids in the street, they don't have medical records, they don't have birth certificates, they can't even prove they exist. So if the police take them and put them in jail, they could be gone forever. We looked for him for 3 years. We learned that he had been rescued a second time, ran off again from that situation, and then Kenya erupted in violence and rioting, and he was never heard of again, and we believe that he was killed in the violence on the street in Kibera, the largest slum in Nairobi. And I went back to Haruma, to Mama, who has a big heart and who's rescued kids for decades. And I was there for 5 seconds, and she put like a snotty baby who's drilling snot all over me in my arm, which she always does. And we're touring and walking around the place. And I said, Mama, what happened to Emmanuel? Where's Emmanuel? And she went like this to all of the kids in the dining hall. And she said, there's Emmanuel, and there's Emmanuel, and there's Emmanuel, and there's Emmanuel. And what she meant was, of course, you know, the need is great, and we tried the best we could, but now you've got Josiah drooling snot all over your shirt. So, you know, worry about him for now, and let's keep going. So that's what happened. Kind of sad. Okay, it's Friday. Can you just leave? I mean, are you allowed to like just get up and go? And you want to book? Can you just book out of here? I mean, it's beautiful out. Yeah, you have such a beautiful home. You know, so thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.